This is Past Daily's 1,000-Yard Stare. I'm Gordon Skeen. I'm your host, and this is our weekly wrap-up, our podcast version of Past Daily's dose of history, pop culture, and all things fun and interesting. And let's get started. This week is the one that's ending on July 13th, 2018. Let's start with... Shall we try Monday? Yes, let's try Monday.
Good morning. I'm Mike Pulsifer, and this is the CBS World News Roundup. A long, painstaking search continues in Brownsville, Texas, as authorities look for more victims of this week's department store roof collapse. Police say at least 16 people are known dead, nearly 50 hurt. 2 bodies were pulled from the rubble overnight, and authorities now are trying to recover 4 more. Brownsville city official Ivan Welker says crews tunneled through the night in the search for more victims.
They have reached the foundation floor at several points. It's a matter now of gingerly removing some of the heavier pieces of concrete and infrastructure and twisted I-beams and things like that to, peek under them to see what's there. It's a time-consuming process, brick by brick, joint by joint.
The Dallas Morning News is quoting Brownsville building inspector Fernando Romero as saying it appears the drains on the building's roof had clogged up, allowing water to collect during a fierce rainstorm Thursday afternoon. The weight of the accumulated water may have been too much, causing the roof to collapse. However, the official cause will not be determined until an investigation can be completed. Hope has been all but abandoned for the 149 men still missing in the wake of an explosion and fire aboard an oil rig in the North Sea. 17 bodies have been recovered. 3/4 of the huge structure sank, and authorities believe many of the missing are trapped inside. More from Martha Teichner in Aberdeen, Scotland.
The search for bodies has been called off as attention shifts to capping underwater leaks from the wrecked Piper Alpha oil platform that continue to cause fires. 4 separate investigations have already begun to determine how the loss of life could have been prevented. American oil fire expert Red Adair is aboard the Piper Alpha rig today. He spent the night on a support vessel nearby. When the Piper Alpha was built, he designed some of the safety systems. The retired safety manager for Occidental Petroleum, the company that owns the rig, has said that 4 years ago he recommended separating the living quarters from the production areas. But the company simply reinforced the walls. In fact, the design meets legal specifications for rigs built in 1976. But Occidental's chairman, Armand Hammer, said in Aberdeen yesterday that the company's investigation of the disaster may force a change in design. Martha Teichner, CBS News, Aberdeen.
There was also bribery scandals going on in the Defense Department. How unusual. Yes, Defense Department, Assistant Navy Secretary and later Defense Department consultant Melvin Paisley was accused of taking bribes during and after his government service. The newly released evidence indicated that the scandal had been going on since the beginning of the Reagan administration. Paisley served as Assistant Navy Secretary from 1981 to 1987. During the height of the Reagan defense buildup. Okay, that's Monday of July 9th. And, we also had an interview with Edward Heath, who was at the time became head of the Conservative government in Britain. And he's interviewed on this 1966 Meet the Press broadcast. Let's have a little listen to that here, and you'll get an idea what's going on.
Mr. Heath, after the defeat of the Conservative Party in the last election, you were quoted as saying the Tory Party is changing and will continue to change. Has there been any big change yet?
Yes, I think there have been considerable developments. As far as policy is concerned, we have already developed policy a great deal since the election defeat of 1964. In the House of Commons, I've reorganized the shadow cabinet and made it much smaller. We had 70 members altogether on our front bench. I've now brought them down to 23. And we're now starting to reorganize the panel of candidates for the future and also the constituency organization, that is the voting areas for our members.
In terms of policy, what do you consider the most significant change that has taken place in the Tory party?
In questions of policy, we've really set out 5 major points. The first is on the economy, to emphasize much more a high-wage, low-cost economy in which we do away with restrictions in trade unions. Secondly, ways of dealing with wildcat strikes. Thirdly, the social services, that as we become more affluent, people should contribute more themselves. fourthly, a great housing program, and fifthly, the clear declaration that we want to become a member of the European Economic Community, the common market.
That was Edward Heath, who wound up actually becoming Prime Minister in the early 1970s, but in 1966 he became leader of the Conservative Party after the Conservative Party's defeat in the 1964 elections. So, there you go. You have a little bit of that. Oh, yes. You might want to have a little listen to this. This is the Bonzo Dog Band, one of my favorites from the late 1960s, the Bonzo Dog Doodah Band, as they were referred to. This is a session that they did for John Peel at the BBC Radio 1.
Hey up, Dad, all we're saying is give booze a chance.
Hey, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Everybody's talking about light ale, brown ale, lagers, very sun, silver, rick, penis, swing, vodka, all we are saying is give booze a chance. All we are saying is give booze a chance. Everybody's drinking up vodka, Africa, pink gin, suspense, bitter, red wine, bloody all we are saying. All we are saying is give booze a chance.
So that is what was happening on Monday. Tuesday, July 10th. We went back to July 10th, 1948.
CBS News presents Report from Overseas. Today, by transcription from London, Stephen Laird reports the average British view on local and foreign affairs. Now and then, he suggests the British can cast aside their worries and concentrate on less pressing matters. And here now is Stephen Laird.
Almost everybody in Britain today is supremely concentrated on one story in the news. A typical headline over this story says, "England's still there and fighting back." You might suppose the British were at war somewhere in this troubled world. But no, they're simply doing better now in their international cricket match with the Australians. The British military is in all-out operation against rebellious natives in Malaya. The Palestine fighting is on again. The crisis continues in Berlin. But foreign news doesn't interest the British man and woman in the neighborhood the way local events do. The other week, when the international tension began to mount, the London stock market surprisingly held fairly even. At that time, the trade paper Financial Times said that the market should, because of domestic and international strains, be taking a tumble. But fortunately, said the Financial Times, most British investors and speculators were entirely preoccupied with the annual Ascot horse race meeting. Just like you, the average man and woman in Britain is concerned not so much about Palestine and Berlin as they are about the cost of living. How to make ends meet, that's the real 64-pound question over here. Foodstuffs and manufactured goods are not moving out of the shops. People don't have enough money to buy, say the shopkeepers. Can't afford the high prices, say the people. So people turn for relief to their national favorites in the cricket matches and their international favorites in American movies. Chief cinema interest in London at the moment is the opening of Forever Amber. The critics are disappointed. They expected it to have more zip. One critic has rather testily retitled the picture Forever Ambling. As far as the public does follow the foreign news, they prefer to pass it off with a wisecrack. One of these, now going the rounds of London pubs, asks the question, will Tito eventually come in form?
And then we have a commentary from July 1st, 1947, which is a pretty interesting one in the sense that the study was done July 1947. It's 44 million people at the time, remembering there was less than 200 million people in the U.S. in 1947, and that 44 million people would be easily swayed by hucksters and all kinds of con artists. So
we also have a report from Washington that 1/3 of us are dopes. How do you like that? The population reference bulletin says, quote, practically one-third of us are no better intellectually than dull or backward. One-third of a nation, 44 million Clifton Finnegans. And the bulletin says further, as a voting participant in helping to solve the many intricate problems of our complex civilization, a dull and backward individual is almost as helpless as an idiot. In fact, he may be more dangerous to democratic institutions because he is easily commanded by demagogues and dictators. However, the bulletin finds that 27% of the people have superior mental ability, 40% are normal. So all is not hopeless. And if there's any comfort in company, the British, I find, have the same situation. They did a survey there recently, an intelligence survey, and the Royal Commission on Population reported that the average intelligence in England is on the decrease at the rate of 5 intelligence quotient points in 50 to 60 years. So give us another 100 years and we'll all be dopes together.
There you go. And that was a commentary, basically, that was done for ABC Radio on July 1st, 1947. Also, July 7th of 2012 marked the anniversary of the death of Syd Barrett. Syd, who was one of the founding members of Pink Floyd and actually was really responsible for Pink Floyd's early incarnation. These tracks are from a John Peel session in 1970 when there were attempts to establish a solo career for Barrett at the time, and he did have an enormous reputation, and he had quite a lot of people who were helping him out on sessions at that time. And so this session comes 1970, I think, between the period of Madcap Laughs, which was the first album, and Barrett, which was the second album, which there were only 2 at the time. But again, this was another session for John Peel. Now we go to Wednesday. Wednesday is July 11th, 1978, and this one we're talking about the SALT II talks, and what was happening with that, and also the whole issue of dissidents.
Good morning. This is Dallas Townsend with the CBS World News Roundup. Secretary of State Vance is heading for Geneva this morning for 2 days of talks with Soviet Foreign Minister Gromyko, beginning tomorrow, on limitation of strategic arms. But Vance's trip comes at a stormy moment in U.S.-Soviet relations. On the second day of the trials of 2 leading Soviet dissidents, trials that the Carter administration has denounced in strong terms. We'll have the latest on them in a few moments. And consequently, as we hear from CBS News diplomatic correspondent Marvin Kalb, Vance has little hope of achieving a breakthrough at Geneva. Kalb cites 2 reasons.
First, the complexity of the SALT negotiation itself. There is still no accepted formula on modernizing new missile systems or on controlling the Soviet backfire bomber. The second reason relates to the climate of Soviet-American relations, which Vance at a news conference admitted was aggravated by the current trials in Russia of dissident leaders. Vance stressed there was no linkage, that SALT stood on its own feet. Still, it's apparent there is an indirect linkage. White House spokesman Jody Powell has strongly condemned the trials as a sign of weakness, a repressive action, he said, which strikes at the conscience of the entire world. That kind of condemnation is likely to produce a strong Soviet counter-comment. The atmosphere, according to one U.S. official, couldn't be worse for compromising on issues of basic security. Marvin Kalb, CBS News, Washington.
Correspondent Kalb has also learned from sources within the Vance party that the secretary will meet in Geneva with Mrs. Natalia Sharansky, wife of one of the Soviet dissidents now on trial. That meeting, Kalb says, has been ordered by the president. These issues and others were discussed last night at a White House briefing for members of Congress, reported by Lee Thornton.
Some 80 congressmen attended last night's White House briefing to hear the president and top advisors discuss a wide range of foreign policy issues, from the Middle East situation to troop reduction in Europe to SALT and Cyprus. The 3-hour meeting was meant to clarify the administration's foreign policy. The White House also used the occasion to re-emphasize that it does not intend to link the SALT talks to the U.S. protest against Soviet treatment of dissidents. Reaction was split mostly along party lines. Texas Democrat Jim Wright.
If nothing else, he certainly must have achieved tonight a finer appreciation for the almost infinite variety and complexity of the problems in this world of ours. They aren't simple.
Republican Senator Jake Garn felt differently.
I'm disappointed, frankly, that we couldn't have gotten more specific on some issues. It was a very good general overall briefing, but not very specific, and I personally still continue to be very, very disappointed about the responses on SALT.
There will be more of the sessions as the White House tries to clarify its foreign policy to each member of Congress. Lee Thornton, CBS News, the White House.
White House conduct of foreign policy also came under attack from Senator Henry Jackson. In a speech on the Senate floor, Jackson said, quote, "It's high time that we stop the dangerous practice of entering into unequal deals with Moscow in the misguided notion that Soviet leaders will brand our generosity with restraint in international affairs." Those two leading dissidents in Soviet Russia were back in court this morning, one in Moscow, the other in Kaluga, on this second day of their trials. Bernard Redmond has some details on their physical condition.
30-year-old computer specialist Anatoly Sharansky had not been seen by any relatives or friends for 16 months. His brother Leonid was allowed into the courtroom yesterday and later said Anatoly looked well, self-confident, and cheerful, and showed him a photograph of his wife, who has been living in Israel. In contrast, Alexander Ginsburg, the director of the Solzhenitsyn Fund to aid political prisoners and their families, appeared in poor health. His wife, Irina, who was allowed into his trial in Kaluga after not seeing him for 17 months, said he looked and felt terrible. She said the 41-year-old Ginsburg had gone completely gray and looked like a 60-year-old man. A Soviet official said that while Ginsburg was not in perfect health, his condition was fully satisfactory. Bernard Redmond, CBS News, Moscow.
Indian authorities this morning charged former Prime Minister Indira Gandhi with illegally detaining people during her emergency rule in 1975. Another charge was filed against her son, Sanjay.
Okay, that was a taste of what happened on July 11th. In 1978, and as we usually do, if you're not familiar with the website itself, if you're not familiar with what we do, every week it's sort of the same thing. We do whatever news was going on that particular day in history. Usually we'll pick a newscast and do that. And then at night we usually run music, and either it's going to be really, old music, we'll do a lot of, mostly sessions because it's just better that way. It also doesn't dip into the artist's potential royalties. You want that to happen, and you want people to be paid fairly and all like that. So rather than play you records of weird, obscure things, we're doing sessions. And so usually most evenings we do a thing called soundboard, past daily soundboard, and that's what happens in the middle of the week on Wednesdays. and this isn't actually an idea I came up with listening to Radio Prague a couple of years ago. They had a thing called Midweek Concert, which was really interesting because you could hear, what was it, the Czech Philharmonic. I remember a Czech Philharmonic broadcast coming on right after somebody did a program of death metal. And I'm trying to remember if it was Korn or I think it was Korn. It was like an hour's worth of Korn, and then we had the Czech Philharmonic, which was really cool, kind of jarring. But you know what? It's it's all music, and it's stuff that either you're going to like it or you're not going to like it, but at least you're going to be turned on to it. So what I decided to do was I decided that on Wednesday would be what I would call the midweek concert, and the midweek concert is basically classical music. It's either going to be orchestras, either contemporary stuff, contemporary concerts, or it's going to be orchestra concerts in the past, recitals, that kind of stuff. But basically, it's all classical music, and a lot of historic performances too. A lot of people who are not with us anymore, and a lot of historic concerts, and they come from a whole pile of different places. On this particular day, on July 11th. I ran a New York Philharmonic broadcast from 1983 with Klaus Tennstedt guest conducting and Alexander Torade as a piano soloist, and that was full 2-hour concert as it was broadcast in 1983. And so that's what comes up on Wednesdays usually. I try to do it around what I used to call the anti-road rage Wednesday feature on our site, which was something I would try to run in connection with rush hour. Rush hour traffic is something you could listen to and not kill somebody or yourself.
The New York Philharmonic. From Avery Fisher Hall in New York City's Lincoln Center for the Performing Arts, this is Martin Bookspan, speaking to you by delayed broadcast and welcoming you to another concert by the New York Philharmonic. The broadcast is made possible by a grant from Exxon Corporation. Today's program will be under the direction of guest conductor Klaus Tennstedt, principal conductor of the London Philharmonic. We'll hear Robert Schumann's Symphony No. 3, The Rhenish, Boris Blacher's Variations on a Theme of Paganini, and Prokofiev's Piano Concerto No. 3 with Alexander Torade as the piano soloist.
And then right after that, continuing with our sound booth features, which we do every evening, a session by Bill Callahan, or better known as Smog, from 2002, and again a John Peel session.
Beautiful child, beautiful child, you are a beautiful child. More. You fell in love when I was on the town. The years disappeared. Much is gone since then. Bite my lip, and you send me away.
on Thursday, July 12th. And for July 12th, on this day in 1960 Democratic Convention, which was taking place in Los Angeles.
NBC Radio News on the hour from Democratic Convention Hall in Los Angeles. Corvair spotlights the news. Chevy's Corvair, the best-sellers car of the year, brings you Robert McCormick, NBC News.
The news in brief. The Democratic Convention at Los Angeles is right on the verge of breaking one way or the other, and within a few hours we should know how it goes. But before we get into that, 2 airliners ditched in the waters off the Philippine Islands today. A total of 89 people were involved. 87 survived. 1 person died, 1 was injured. The first plane was a Northwest Orient Airlines DC-7C on its way from Tokyo and Okinawa, and it had the only casualties. The second plane, a Philippine Airlines DC-3, came down in shallow water, and all 31 aboard were saved. At the emergency UN Security Council session, Tunisia has introduced a resolution asking the Belgians to pull their troops out of the Congo Republic and authorizing the UN to send in an expeditionary force. This followed a series of delaying tactics by the Soviet, including an attempt to brand Belgium's efforts at restoring order as aggression. The United States offered its backing to the Tunisian resolution. And I'll be back with more news in a moment after this word from Chevrolet.
Oh, that was a good meal, Harry. Now, what was it you wanted to tell me?
Well, Fred, I got this in strictest confidence, so don't repeat a word.
Uh-huh.
That new family that came here last October, the Corvairs.
Sure, they're related to those popular Chevrolets.
Right. Well, when I was in Greenville, North Carolina the other day, I happened to overhear Mr. Cox discussing the Corvairs.
Uh-huh.
And he said, I purchased one of the first Corvairs that came on the market, and I haven't had any trouble with it in any way. I like the comfort, economy, and handling better than any car I've ever owned. I've driven it 12,450 miles to date. My overall average is 22.3 miles per gallon. The performance of this car is far above my expectations.
He said all that, eh?
Practically word for word, Fred.
Boy, these Corvairs are getting more good publicity.
Well, that comes from being the best-sellers car of the year. But, Fred, keep it quiet, or else customers are going to be rushing to the Chevrolet dealers.
Well, I don't think he'd mind, Harry.
Oh, no, but somebody might get hurt.
Again, Robert McCormick.
On the Democratic Convention floor, Governor Stevenson's name has been put into nomination, and it provoked by far the noisiest, wildest demonstration so far. In the meantime, the maneuvering is getting more ferocious on all sides. NBC learned from very authoritative sources that a deal for a Kennedy-Symington ticket was being considered, that Symington would withdraw in favor of Kennedy in return for the vice presidential nomination. The report is being denied by the Symington people on all sides. And also, we have just learned that John Connolly, Senator Johnson's manager, or one of them, has asked Charles Brown of Missouri, who is pushing Symington's campaign, to come to see him. So perhaps we will have contrary deals working against each other, as so often happens in these things. And Chairman Collins, the permanent chairman of the convention, says that he will keep it in session tonight until we get a decision, until one or another of the candidates does get the final nomination. But everything now points to the fact that the convention is about to break. It may, of course, go the way it was predicted to go. Kennedy may have it nailed down, and it probably has stayed nailed. But nevertheless, it has, without question, been loosened at least just a little bit. This is Robert McCormick at Democratic Convention headquarters in Los Angeles.
What's the best thing to do about accidents? Be prepared for them. Know the fundamentals of first aid. Instructions you'll need for treating the more common injuries are on the first aid chart offered by the Metropolitan Life Insurance Company. For a free copy, write to Good Hints, care of NBC, New York, New York. Once again, that's Good Hints, NBC, New York, New York. Ask for Metropolitan's free first aid chart. This has been NBC News on the Hour from Democratic Convention Hall in Los Angeles. Listen again on the hour for the next NBC Radio News, brought to you by Metropolitan Life Insurance Company. Hear the convention sound of the 60s on NBC Radio.
And here we go to Friday the 13th. Yes, July 13th of 1981.
The fight against the Mediterranean fruit fly in Northern California went to the courts today as frightened residents made a last-ditch stand against a pesticide they don't trust. Barry Peterson has the story.
Another hurdle was cleared late today to allow aerial spraying of several neighborhoods where the Mediterranean fruit fly is out of control. Spraying opponents spent the day arguing in a San Jose court that the pesticide to be used, malathion, is not safe. But after hearing both sides, Judge Bruce Allen decided he would not block the effort. Spraying opponents at this hour are trying to persuade the state Supreme Court to take up the matter before the spraying begins, shortly after midnight tonight. In the area to be sprayed, residents aren't sure just what to do. Some were not concerned, one man saying he thought the biggest problem would be the noise from low-flying helicopters. Others are anxious to leave, fearful of the malathion. Some hotels outside the area are booked, and the Red Cross has set up 4 evacuation centers. Meanwhile, experts are warning state and federal officials to get the spraying underway as soon as possible. They worry that a renewed infestation could sweep through the area in the next few days if the flies are not stopped now. Barry Peterson, CBS News, San Francisco.
More news after this.
Imagine desktop system copiers that reduce ledger size down to legal, even letter size, and enlarge an original to make small print more readable. It's the Canon NP400 series. You can feed, making 40 letter-size copies a minute, and sort with optional sorter. The Canon NP400 series, the system copiers that reduce, and enlarge.
The Canon NP400s, the fastest compact system copiers. Micronics makes it simple. Presenting Bill Bixby for Dietac.
Well, you really did it this weekend, didn't you? You ate too much, and now you're going on a diet. Well, the people at Contact have developed something just for you. New maximum strength Dietac with more appetite suppressant, but no stimulant. One capsule helps you control your appetite all day. Helps you stick to your diet and lose weight. New maximum strength Dietac. It gives your diet a fighting chance.
Use only as directed.
Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher visited Liverpool today for the first time since the rioting began in England, and she showed the strain.
They have been the most worrying days. The most worrying days. That I do indeed say. But we haven't had very much sleep. It's never good stopping at that. You've got to try to get over it, and I think almost any woman will tell you this. Women are very used to this. Life has to go on.
It was a careful, discreet visit, heavy with security and with resentment against her. Doug Tennell has a report.
Crowds of demonstrators led by activists from several left-wing political parties chanted, jeered, and booed Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher in Liverpool today, only moments before she had called on all Britons to patch up their differences following 10 days of violence in Britain's racially mixed working-class neighborhoods. Thatcher toured the Toxteth district of the city, where rioting over a week ago ravaged whole blocks of shops, offices, and buildings. Security was tight for her unannounced visit. She met with selected leaders of Liverpool's black community and visited the city's police, who were key targets for the rioters. Mrs. Thatcher voiced some strong support for the forces of law and order. Her government hopes to speed up trials for the estimated 2,500 arrested in disturbances around Britain. She said changes in British law designed to give police broader powers of arrest were being considered. Thatcher said that record unemployment was not the only reason for the recent rioting, but she acknowledged that her government did not yet have all the answers as to why the violence erupted and how it could be avoided in the future. Doug Tennell, CBS News, Liverpool.
And another anniversary, July 13th, this time 1977.
Power has been restored to about 150,000 residents of New York City's borough of Queens and to another 50,000 people in suburban Westchester County to the north. But for the overwhelming majority of New York City residents, the power blackout that began about 5.5 hours ago continues. Officials of Consolidated Edison, the electric company serving the city, said the problem began with an intense electrical storm that knocked out at least 2 power-generating facilities. Mayor Abraham Beam told the City Hall news conference that arrangements have been made for backup power if necessary.
I spoke with the governor
who has informed me that there have been backup arrangements made with other states in case their power shortage isn't restored, in the hope that by daylight we'll be able to get either one of these, either the backup system or our own power restored.
New York's airports closed down. Traffic snarled as both street and traffic light systems went out. Subways and trains stopped. Two young ladies from Connecticut who had attended the Broadway performance of Beatlemania were interviewed by Doug Poling at Grand Central Station.
The police told us that this is the best place to be.
The safest place to be, with a lot of people and a lot of reliable cops like these over here.
So what happened after you? How long have you been here?
We've been here about 3 hours.
What have you been doing?
We've been partying. We've been having a good time making the best of it.
So you're really not suffering too much?
Oh, I'm suffering, believe me. I'd like to take a shower and just go to bed and get to summer school in the morning.
But it could be worse.
Oh, it could be worse, yes. But anyway, it's fun. We make the best of it.
All right, and then to end up the week, a session from a short-lived band. Unfortunately, they were only around for like about 3 years. And again, one of the pivotal indie bands of the early late 80s, early 90s group called the Field Mice. This is a session that the Field Mice did in 1990 on April 1st of 1990 for BBC Radio 1 at the time, and it was John Peel. So that's a wrap-up. That's what happened this week. You came by every day and visited us on Past Daily, pastdaily.com. You would be hearing these things in their entirety, but since we're only going to do this for like an hour to give you a taste, hopefully that will get you to come on over and listen to the complete stuff, because that's what we try to do every week. Anyway, this is our first podcast. I'm sure that we'll do other and more interesting things as time goes on, but we just wanted to get this thing started and get you guys listening and turning you on to what we do over here. And we've been doing this now for a few years. Just to sort of let you know, you can come over, and I would, encourage you to come and visit visit us, hang out for a while. You can spend as long or as little time as you want. We've got some 6,000 posts so far. We've only been up for a few years, and we do this every day. So, and it's, some of it's really interesting stuff, some of it's not so interesting stuff, some of it's, pretty historic, and some of it's stuff that you just had no idea was there. Anyway, so there's a bunch of that, but I would really urge you to come on over and visit and hang out and just go exploring, because it's a great place to do that. Anyway, so that's what we're all about. That's what we're doing. Come on over and have a visit, and in the meantime, have a listen to what we're doing, and come back next week, and we'll have some more, okay? So that's it for the Past Daily's 1,000-Yard Stare for the week ending July 13th, 2018.